Her name is Mina. She was rescued 2 weeks before you got here. She was rescued from enslavement in the circus. She was also rescued from sex slavery at 11 years old. And I just took a look at that child. One of my own daughters was 11 years old back in the US while I was there in India. And I said, you know, she could have been mine, except that I was born in a different country. And I made it all the way through the gate, back out again before I started crying. I felt like the entire world had turned upside down. I felt disillusioned. Slavery, wasn't this something that had been eradicated? When I finally kind of came to and said, this is not acceptable, I thought I've got a couple of choices. One is I can either kind of forget that I ever witnessed this, or I can agree to make a difference. So I vowed that very day in India I would make a difference toward ending child slavery and human trafficking. I got home and I realized I knew nothing. I didn't know why slavery was still going on. I didn't know how it happened, why these kids have been enslaved. I didn't know the definition of human trafficking. I look at slavery as having three factors. And victims of sex trafficking are, of course, slaves. Slaves work unpaid, they're unable to leave, and they are subject to violence, brutal violence, or threats, either to themselves or to someone they love. The Trafficking Victims Protection Act, which is referred to as TVPA, it's the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act, where such an act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such act has not attained 18 years of age. One of the most important things is how desperately they need their humanity to be recognized, and how they need to be treated with dignity and respect. It's something they haven't gotten, and it's something they desperately need. There are predators out there, whether they're in malls, coffee shops, or simply on the street, who know the new faces, the new girls who are out there. And they are the first to say, I see you're alone. You're much too sweet to be left alone. The conversation develops quickly into, you don't have a place to stay? Come stay with me. I will love you the way your family didn't love you. I'll take care of you, feed you, put a roof over your head. Let me buy you some pretty clothes. You're also very pretty. This is music to their ears. And yet very quickly, the situation goes from a situation where you feel like you're a princess to a situation where, again, look at the definition. Now you're being asked to dance, exotic dancing. Maybe you're asked to strip, to pose for photographs, or you're being asked or being forced to work in a brothel. It goes very quickly from a situation where you're being told, I'll love you like you haven't been loved before, to a situation where you're working unpaid, you can't leave, and you are subject to terrible, brutal violence. How many times can you sell a drug? It can only be consumed once. A human can be sold over and over again. And there have been cases, for instance, where a pimp or a trafficker has bought a girl in the U.S. for $600. There are accounts of buying slaves, boys in Ghana, to serve the fishing industry for $200. Where you can, there have been accounts where you can buy a child for $50 in Haiti to either work with, in domestic servitude, or to be used for sex. So it takes a trafficker. It also takes consumers. Someone is buying sex from sex trafficking victims, or we're buying goods either knowingly or unknowingly that are produced by slave labor. The last factor in slavery is a society or the community, a population that is either uneducated, they don't know that it exists. That's changing a little bit, we're learning. It may be people who are apathetic. Yeah, well, so it affects me, so what? That's a really hard one to take. but that exists out there. The other possibility is that sometimes we feel overwhelmed. Now that we learn that this terrible thing exists, how are we going to fight it? Aren't there already a million huge problems? And this system of slavery as the starting point for what we as a society needs to do. What is our responsibility? We need to poke at each one of those systems. With victims, I think it's our responsibility. We need to protect folks from sexual abuse. Obviously, prevention is the best thing we can do. We need to begin to look at victims as victims instead of as criminals. What a common myth of sex trafficking, of prostitution, is that this is a victimless crime. Those women want to do that. I'm here to tell you, women do not want to have sex. Men do not want to have sex. 20 to 25 strangers a day. You're exposed to pregnancy, terrible STDs, other health problems. We have a responsibility as citizens to work with our legislators to say, what kind of laws can we enact that will keep traffickers from either repeating their crimes, to prosecute. In fact, there is a law right now, it's a bill, Senate Bill 75 in Pennsylvania. It's very comprehensive. It looks at providing a definition of human trafficking so that we can prosecute traffickers better. It looks at provisions, providing the services that victims and survivors who've been rescued need. I think we have that responsibility to understand that there's a national human trafficking hotline. I think we have to be educated. We need to learn more about the crimes of human trafficking, sex trafficking, and modern slavery, so that we're now aware that this is a system and that we can fight it, that there are solutions. I was working with a group of survivors one day, and we made something we were calling wish flags. It's something I've done in both India with girls who survived sex trafficking and with adult females here who have survived it. And that is taking just really brightly colored pieces of fabric and writing their dearest wish on it, then stringing them up on a clothesline. What are your aspirations? What do you care about? What would you be if you could be anything now that you are recovering? And I remember one fairly young woman said to me, I just want to be a normal person. If I could have any wish in the world, I would be normal. And we had a conversation about what it means to be normal. Am I normal? Are you normal? Having said that, she has not lived one of those happy lives. One woman who allows me to share her story is named Anne-Marie. When she was 13, she was sexually abused by her brother. She went and told her mother. Her mother didn't want to hear it. Much to Anne-Marie's shock, surprise, and hurt, she was asked to sweep that information under the rug. And eventually feeling like there was no one who cared about her. Years went by, and Anne-Marie had that longing for that happy family. She said that she found a young man. All went very well for a number of years until she got the call who said that her daughter had been sexually abused by her brother. All the memories that she had squashed and tamped down came right back at her. All the hurt she had felt, that no one stuck up for her, no one seemed to care about her when that had happened to her, came back in spades. She did fight to put her brother in prison. She brought justice for her daughter, but her husband began drinking. Her marriage fell apart. Her relationship with her daughter dissolved. She ended up out on the streets. She ended up addicted to drugs. One day, she was beaten absolutely severely. When she got back from the hospital, there was a neighbor who was saying, let me love you, let me take care of you, that shouldn't have happened to you. And instead of being a kind neighbor who really was willing to help, he was a pimp from New York. She was trafficked for 10 years before she finally got help. She has since become someone who is helping other women who were in the life that she once had. She has become a peer counselor after her recovery and rehabilitation. She has Howdy Maya is the name of this woman. And again, she was kidnapped and sold to a brothel when she was a young woman. And she has been one of the leading forces after being rescued and after starting Shakti Samuha in helping change the laws in Nepal and in helping other survivors get back on their feet and to recover from what is a terrible, terrible crime that's been inflicted against them. They're also currently working on an international hotline. So if you happen to be in an airport, you're leaving one country headed to another, and it looks like this person may be headed to yet a third country or coming from a third country, and they appear to be under the control of someone else. Looks like they're 16 years old. They're disoriented. They look like they need help. For tipsters and victims to call. If you suspect something is awry, that there may be a victim of human trafficking, or if you yourself are in captivity. My job with these other women is simply to provide an opportunity for survivors to develop healthy relationships, maybe even friendships, in an atmosphere of dignity, respect, and freedom. Some of them have come back to me and said, you know, Carol, I never, until I went to Dawn's place, had a friendship or a good relationship with a female for my entire life, and they're 40 years old. There are myths. One is that it's a victimless crime. And of course, through our discussion today, we've talked about the fact that it is brutal, absolutely brutal. There are women who have, been raped. They have had knives and guns held to them. They have had their heads stomped on. There's a lot of head trauma. Many of the survivors have scars under their hairline where they've been beaten and you can't see it. It's not a victimless crime. The average life of a woman who's being prostituted once she begins entry is 7 years. Are introduced to drugs after they have been forced into a brothel or massage parlor or working out on the streets. It's painful. The only way you can get up during the day is when your pimp provides what's called a wake-up kit. And that is, he brings in the needle, the syringe, a pipe, and whatever your drug of choice is. Drugs are another way of keeping someone, and their addiction is another way of keeping someone enslaved. And as soon as we begin thinking of her as a victim who needs our help, instead of as a criminal who should be arrested for prostitution and chided and thought of as Jezebel, I think the sooner the attitudes are going to change that we give them the help that they need. The sooner we begin thinking more about projects like Project Dawn Court, which is rehabilitation instead of reincarceration. It's helping, it's finding more places like Dawn's Place that help women find, positive, brighter futures by giving them the help they need.